Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Vicky Rice, Managing Director of Let's Talk Communications and Chair of CIPR Wessex. It's great to see such a strong interest in what really is an important and timely conversation. For those who may not know, the CIPR is the world's only Royal Chartered professional body for public relation practitioners, representing 11,000 members globally. Its focus on promoting high standards, ethical practice, and continual professional development across our industry. At a regional level, CIPR Wessex exists to bring practitioners together, to share insights, to challenge thinking, and to support one another as the profession evolves. And it's fair to say that the profession is evolving quickly. We're operating in an environment where the volume and speed of information have increased dramatically, and with that, so have the risks. We've seen a rise in misinformation, the growing use of AI-generated content, and more recently, increased scrutiny around so-called fake experts appearing in the media. Research published by Press Gazette highlighted this very issue, identifying instances of unverified and misleading expert commentary across a number of major news outlets, even going so far as to publicly name both individuals and publications involved. That has inevitably raised some questions, not just for journalists, but for all of us working in communications, about verification, responsibility, and trust. Industry bodies, including the CIPR and PRCA, have issued a joint call for stronger standards, reinforcing the importance of transparency and accountability and robust verification in how expert voices are sourced and represented. This has been supported by broader professional guidance, such as the Chartered Institute of Journalists Code of Conduct, alongside international work led by the Council of Europe to strengthen trust and transparency and freedom of expression in the media. So today's session is really about that shared responsibility. It isn't about pointing fingers to either PR or journalism. It's about recognising that trust in media is something we all have a role in shaping and maintaining. We brought together a fantastic panel to explore this from multiple perspectives. So please let me introduce you to Fazana Badwell, President of CIPR, Gerald Bowie, President of the Chartered Institute of Journalists, Adam Kirtley, who's a journalist at the BBC and amongst other places, Kate Steele, who's a prior senior communications leader at Microsoft, and Matt McKenna, who's managing director of a large regional PR agency called McKenna Townsend. Together, they bring experience from across journalism, in-house, and agency communications and industry, which should make for a really well-rounded and practical discussion. We'll start with a few questions from me to the panel, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So please do share your questions as we go. So with that, let me ask my first question, and to Fazana, if you wouldn't mind. How serious is this issue in reality? Is this a growing systemic problem, or are we just more aware of it now?
I think it is a serious concern because it erodes the one currency that us as PRs need in order to do our jobs, and that is trust. And what we're finding is systemic. So what you have is the backdrop of the loss of advertising revenue that has flown from journalism to social media platforms that has resulted in newsrooms being decimated. When I first came into the industry about 16 years ago, I remember dealing with multiple journalists on a particular story, and there was fact checkers there and so forth. And then I saw them being whittled away. And then over time, you then started seeing them go freelance. And then over time, you started seeing journalists not only go freelance as a journalist, but also freelancing as a PR and as a journalist. And so what you see is the economic reality that has hit journalists and newsrooms that has resulted in the situation where the emphasis upon PRs to provide accurate information to journalists it's more important now than ever. And before, I think PRs, we would often see journalists as these very well-resourced gatekeepers. But over the course of the last decade and longer, what you've seen is it sort of flipped. The number of sort of PRs have increased and the number of journalists has reduced. And I think that does result in an important mission and responsibility for PRs to recognize that shift and also to take that responsibility to ensure that we are providing accurate information to journalists, being mindful about what the economic considerations that have occurred in journalism. Saying that, as obviously as a president of Chartered Institute of Public Relations, we have a very clear code of conduct that prevents our members from behaving in such a way, and we are to provide information that is true and accurate. The issue is that only a fraction of PRs are members of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, number one. Number two, there's a lot of other disciplines that are swimming in the lanes of PRs and provide PR as a service as an add-on. So they're perhaps marketing with an add-on of PR, or perhaps as even legal law firms with an add-on of PR. And so you're also seeing a lot of these sort of transgressions, as it were, from agencies that are not necessarily PR first as well. And that's so there's many sort of threads to pull on as to why we find ourselves here. But there's a number of others, panelists, who may want to share some other insight.
I was going to say maybe, Fazana, I think that's a fantastic summary. I would sort of approaching this discussion thinking about the need to be practical, but I would also, the way in which I was sort of trained within Microsoft was to sort of think about things in sort of three different buckets or through three different lenses, however you want to sort of call it. So context, culture, and course of action. So three different things. Because I think that Fazana mentioned that this was systemic. I think that there is absolutely a discussion, course of action around this particular issue. But I would go so far as to say that all of us within the profession, so those of us who are communicators and those of us who are in the media, need to almost zoom out and think about the broader context, which I think is much more problematic, particularly in the UK. I think that AI is accelerating and scaling the problem, and that's what technology does. That's what the business model of technology companies does, is they scale and accelerate. But I would argue that you can trace back lack of trust more broadly to, I don't know, the 2008 financial crash. You've got COVID, you've got Brexit, you've got bad state actors coming in here and flooding the zone with misinformation. And so I think that whilst this is a very specific issue that we can say, yeah, we can come together and actually resolve it, I think there is a more existential challenge for those of us who are communicators and those of us who are in the media, which is within the UK, where trust is plummeting like a stone in all of our institutions. How do we show up every single day and think about when we're communicating, when we're putting campaigns together, when we're advising sort of senior spokespeople? How do we think about it within that context? And so that's one of the things I was always trained to do was, yes, there are the specifics, but it's the zoom out to think about that, because I think there's a broader challenge for all of us. I do have some practical ideas as well, by the way. I'm not just giving you a history lesson here, but I think it's worth us thinking about that, just in terms of how we might then move forwards downstream to sort of fix some of these issues.
Thank you, Kate. Gerald, just want to bring your perspective in from the Chartered Institute of Journalism.
Yes, thank you. Well, we are a very old establishment. We're 142 years old. I believe we're the world's oldest association for professional journalists, and it's been very important over those years that we've maintained a very high standard of membership, level of membership to become a member, and that's more or less on the bedrock of trust. It's on the bedrock of doing the research, getting the exchange of comments, doing balanced pieces, and leaving the reader or the listener to arrive at their own conclusions from the information that you've supplied to them. Now, we live in a much faster moving world now, But that doesn't mean that you can abandon those parameters. We're looking at our code of conduct, which of course is was written some time ago, to some extent echo the CIPR initiative, and that is to ensure that we give guidelines that apply to the communications industry that we're in today. And also, of course, younger people use technology in an entirely different way to many of the older members in journalism. So it's a learning curve, but so is AI. We're at the beginning of the use of AI. It's developing literally by the hour and by the day. So whatever we're talking about today, there will probably be an entirely different tool called AI in our daily lives that will develop as we go along. And we've got to make sure that we're looking at those trends, looking at training, looking at conduct, and looking at encouraging. As many people will lose their jobs because they don't engage with AI as are possibly at the moment because of AI. So it's a moving target, and we've got to make sure that we're keeping our eye on it.
Thank you, Gerald. Adam, as a practicing journalist, what's your perspective on this topic?
Well, I'm quite optimistic, actually. Everything that has been said is right. So, Fazana, you talk about the decimation of newsrooms. Just this week, the BBC's announced another 2,000 job losses. I don't actually know which directorates those job losses are, but I guess some will be news. The Hampshire Chronicle is my local paper, based sort of centered around Winchester. And it used to have, I always mention this when I'm doing media training, which I do a lot of as well. And they say they've got 17 journalists historically. They've now got 2.5. And the half is a mum who works part time. So of course, technology has enabled fewer people, but I think the world of journalism is under threat financially. However, the reason I'm optimistic is because good journalists and good PR people work together, and as long as we are fastidious, I think we can actually use AI. It saves a lot of time in research, as long as, and this is the key thing, we all use it as a tool and we use human beings to verify it. And I think that's where AI has gone wrong. Everyone I mean, universities are now screening things for dissertations, aren't they? And they can spot if somebody's used AI. When it first came in, people were just thinking, this is a ball. I can just write a fantastic 7,000 word piece and I'm going to get a first. Well, that's no longer the case because they can spot it. So I'm actually optimistic that as long as we are fastidious, in both of our professions, journalism and PR, we trust each other, we maintain relationships, and we monitor the AI and verify it humanly, I think we're going to be okay.
Thank you, Adam. Matt, running an agency that represents a lot of clients, you'll be asked to curate, experts on behalf of your clients. How do you manage that from a practical perspective, and what's your position, in relation to this topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, our industry is all built on trust between consumers, reading the media, journalists, and also PRs. And once we start eroding that trust, our job becomes harder. And we really do need to get to grips with this problem fairly quickly. It's nothing new. We've always had, I think a lot of people, Press Gazette in their research were calling them bad actors, these PRs that are bringing in, fake experts. And that. I would go further and call them scammers. We've always had scammers in industry, in journalism, and I believe they need to be called out via the industry as well. So, we as an industry need to make sure that we get to grips with this problem very, very quickly. It's nothing new, but AI has definitely compounded it. And actually, when I read the Press Gazette's research into it, it was a real eye-opener as to the amount of issues that are out there with this at the moment. It was a real eye-opener. I think there may be some differences between national media and sector-led media at this point in time, but at some point it's going to affect all of the media that we're trying to talk to. So I think if you're talking to national media, they must be bombarded with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of communications every day from PRs and fake PRs as well. I think when you're talking to your sector media, and I'm not talking about every sector media being exactly the same, I think there are usually closer relationships between PRs and the sector media. So that may help a little bit. But as I said, it's going to get worse. And we do need to get to grips with this. From our point of view, the first stop is you need to join a nationally accredited association like the CIPR. You have rules and regulations with it. You have really good training with it. And it makes sure that you behave in a professional way. So from our point of view as an agency, that's our first stop. And that's when anyone joins the agency, they have to become members. They go through the training, and also they adhere to these rules and regulations, which are a really good thing. It means they conduct themselves properly.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Matt. Kate, you mentioned you had some practical advice as well.
Yeah, as well as a history lesson. Yeah, sorry about that. I think so. Just building on what Matt said, though, I think it's if you're looking at it from in-house, it's very, very similar, right? It's like, are you? So when I was at Microsoft, obviously AI was not limited to the communications professional. It was what we were building, and so the company as a whole had a whole training program that everybody in the company went through, had to go through. It was absolutely mandated to understand what responsible AI development looked like. And of course, it was tailored for different people. So if you were a developer, it was different if you were doing a different job to a salesperson. But it was absolutely expected that everybody would take part in this training. And I think so. I think you're going to see this in-house, and I think you're also going to see this in agency as well. And the CIPR is an amazing resource for that. And I know that Farzana, you've been thinking about this for quite some time. I would also, the culture piece I think is so important as well. And Matt talked about bad actors and things. Again, I think anything that you're doing around AI, whether you're agency or whether you're in-house, has to ladder back to what are your company's values. It has to tie into that. Does everybody understand what the values of the company are? What do you stand for? And then your AI strategy and your AI ethics come out from that. So I think the two of them you can't uncouple. And again, when I joined Microsoft, it was made very clear what our company's mission was, but it was also made very, very clear what our values were. And those values were role modeled at the very top of the organization. So I think, again, it's like AI is changing our entire world, but it shouldn't change as organizations what we stand for. And who we are and what we believe in. This is just a kind of another iteration.
I agree with you completely, Kate. And I think this is why I'm optimistic. So when I first joined the BBC, it literally was a China graph and a piece of tape and a razor blade, and that's how you edited it. Now I can sit on my laptop and do something 50 million times more complicated. But the ethics of how you edit and how you make a final piece sound and the skill of editing to make the sound nice hasn't changed. It's exactly the same. We are human beings. And I think if there's one thing we should all take away from this is that we must always remain human. And really, AI is a vehicle for us to do our job properly. And I think from a journalist point of view, the way we can be helped by PR is that you do exactly as Kate said, that the PR people we're dealing with have ethics and they have systems in place and that they do have checks and balances, and then we can trust them. And the problem is sorting the wheat from the chaff. So, there's a lot of great publications out there. I mean, Unheard, Politico, these are not mainstream BBC, Sky News people, but they're good and they have decent journalists. But there's an awful lot of rubbish out there. And for a journalist, it's about discerning, I think, what the wheat is and what the chaff is. And PR agencies or in-house PR can really help us with that by having their own code of conduct and doing it properly. Because we are tight, for time. We're less resourced than we used to be ever, and we need your help to keep all of us on the straight and narrow, I think.
There's also an element of reputational risk. So when you look at the stories that's come out in the newspapers about the fake experts, it's been a huge negative reputation for the journalist, the media outlet, the PR agency, the PR person that pitched it, as well as the client that they were representing. So actually, there's no winners in this. And so, in the CIPR, one of our key pillars is to make the case for PR, not just within our industry, but outside of our industry. And that includes employers so that they understand the value of training and CPD, and that means aligning to an ethical code of conduct, but also to clients as well, so that when they are looking to hire agencies, they start looking for these hallmarks of of industrial industry alignment. And so I think it's broader. I think one is to understand that there is a huge reputational risk at stake, and for us to make the case outside of the PR industry, so people understand, a little bit like my former background as an accountant. We had chartered and accountants and other accountants that weren't, and people by and large know the difference. And so you sometimes can't you can't get a certain audit unless you go to a chartered firm. So you'll probably start seeing that emerge as more and more of these cases come through, where people outside of the PR industry start realizing the importance of these of professional bodies and industry bodies that have a code of conduct, because otherwise it's the wild, wild west.
Gerald, you wanted to come in?
I was sort of following on from something that Adam was touching upon. We have pulled together an industry group to look at, we're calling it a kite mark, but that's just a working phrase. Would it be sensible, useful, and effective if, when information was being circulated from chartered people in the PR sector, PRCA, CIPR, if a journalist had some sort of a flag that immediately alerted to them the fact that that had come from a member of a professional body with a code of conduct, would this save time, and would this give them some confidence? That shouldn't stop them checking and double checking, but at least it would start from a positive position and would keep the misinformation and disinformation levels under control.
May I jump in? Perhaps
Yeah.
there's a conversation that perhaps we should pursue, because actually we have certain terminology that describes whether a CIPR member has been doing their CPD, if they're accredited for 2 cycles and so forth. And within our CPD, we have a mandatory ethics component as well of 5 points out of 60. And so perhaps there could be a way that the CIPR and we can work with journalists, bodies such as yourself, in order to help them understand and sort of navigate, because it may not be clear to them, what's the difference between a member, accredited, chartered, and I think people are often surprised to hear that we have a mandatory ethics component in our CPD, but then again, not all members complete their CPD, and so I think that could be a follow-on campaign that we can work together on.
That sounds like a very interesting idea. Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good idea. But of course, not everyone who works in PR, especially with small businesses, may not be a member of a big organization. And we do get some terrific stories from small businesses. I mean, if you take the missing capybara, which was just in our village, which were very famous, that's from a small zoo. It has a small PR function, but it's not got a massive organization behind it to steer it. But I would say this when I'm doing talks with businesses. I would go further, and I have always said, much to my colleagues' chagrin sometimes, I personally think, especially for big organizations, that the head of comms in an organization should be on the board of directors. I've always thought that, because quite honestly, CFOs and the likes, they don't understand PR and comms. It's a cost to them often. They sort of think, what is this blinking department? But actually, and with my media training and crisis media training hat on, it's absolutely vital that the board of directors get sound advice in terms of dealing with PR. Because if they have if something goes wrong, it can be an absolute PR disaster. So I would say, I don't know, Fazana, if you agree, but I would say for bigger, not for tiny organizations, but for big organizations, the board of directors should include the head of comms. There you go.
Yes, Adam, we in our last year's conference at the CIPR, we had a focus for some of our sessions on actually elevating comms to board level, and so we have educational resources. It's a big area for us because actually the skill sets that PRs have, especially around risk and horizon scanning, is particularly important for NED roles increasingly in a volatile world where there's a lot of sort of change in terms of technology. So absolutely, I think there is a huge opportunity, I think, for PR people in terms of non-executive director roles.
Looking at the more junior part of our profession, though, coming in and not having any established journalist relationships, for example, how do we help those people, become trusted sources of information and part of the conversation?
For me, it's about it's the same skill sets that we've always had, which is understanding the journalist that you're talking to, making sure that you've got the right research in place, making sure that you're pitching the story at the right time, and then slowly developing your relationships with the journalist as well. So you build up that trust. I don't think there's a silver bullet to any of this. It's what we've always done, which is build trust, earn your trust, and then you get the results from it as well. And we've always had to do that from when we went into agencies as juniors as well. So if you go into an agency, you perhaps have the added credibility that the agency has been dealing with some of the media in the past quite a lot already, so whether it's sector or national. But it doesn't stop individuals from building up relationships with journalists, getting cracking stories, and just doing the right thing. You also have resources that you can call upon as well. So, if you're going to do something on research that you want to sell into a publication, go with a really good research house like Ipsos, who aren't going to let you mistreat the information. They're going to want decent experts being put forward. They're not going to allow anything that is sent to the media that they're not happy with. So you also have to pick your resources carefully as well when you're talking to journalists. And again, that just builds up your credibility.
Absolutely. Kate, from an in-house perspective, some practitioners leave university and don't go via the agency route. The agency route is, as you and I established in our early careers, a really good source of grounding your disciplines and your ethics. But if you choose not to go down that road, how can you be supported in-house in the same way?
I think, and again, sort of speaking to my experience, I think you can be very strongly supported in-house. I think if you're going to a really large organization, then typically if you're coming in at sort of entry level, you will be reporting into other comms people who have a management responsibility, who have codified responsibilities to coach you, to ensure you get mentored, to ensure you get trained. I think that, actually what was really interesting to me from going from agencies and lots of different agencies where I learned so much and worked with some incredible people, but going in-house to a very admittedly very large organization, the training that was available and the requirements that everybody had to go through so certainly an element of CPD, but there was also sort of voluntary stuff as well. Really, kind of knocked me off my feet. So I think if you're going, so I would say be really confident. If you're going in-house, you're probably not going to take on the head of comms as somebody who's coming in at an entry level. So work with the person who is managing you, work with the person who's leading you. I would also really encourage entry level people to, there's a couple of things. One is ask for what you need. right? Really ask for what you need. I think that sometimes we can feel that we're so grateful to get a role, but actually you need to be in. But what an organization wants you to do is be the very best and deliver for them. So ask for what you need in order to deliver that. Do you need to be accredited? Do you need to do training? And the other thing I would sort of finally observe is also, if you are entry level person, just ask to go along with a senior person. I sat in on, cups of coffee with journalists. I've done that. I don't remember being thrown to the wolves as a junior PR person. I remember going along with an account director who had relationships with some senior journalists who scared me to death. But I remember going along and thinking, oh, right, okay, this is how you do it. So I think there's lots there, but I definitely think you will probably get more training in-house, because you're coming into an environment that tends to require you to be trained, in my experience.
Thanks, Kate. Gerald, do you want to?
I was just going to add, obviously, in journalism, you can go to faculties and you can take courses and become proficient. But it's by example, really, I think, in terms of journalism, and that we have this new Young Journalist of the Year awards. And we don't target young journalists, we target broadcast, national newspapers, magazines, and online platforms. But we target the senior people to tell us who their up and coming young journalists are and put them into the awards. What that does is it immediately they are judged by a diverse panel of judges from all sectors of the media. They get critiqued. And some of those young people, this is only our second year, but some of those people have actually been promoted through the entries of their work into our awards. So it's celebrating, highlighting, celebrating, and encouraging young journalists. I believe is the most effective way that my institute and the journalist sector can bring new talent on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree with that. And I again, being the eternal optimist, young journalists, there are some darn good young journalists out there. And one thing we have to remember is that age group, mid-20s onwards, say, or early 20s onwards, they have grown up with social media. We learnt social media. They've grew up with it. The younger ones are going to be growing up with AI. And so it's going to be normal for them. And just a couple of little examples. So our three children are completely immersed in AI and they can spot it a mile off. So Arthur, my youngest, I was telling him about there's a newspaper article floating around. It's a black and white picture of a young Trump, and it's an article written by allegedly his mother saying he's a lovely boy, but I wouldn't let him anywhere near the presidency. And I said to Arthur, our 19-year-old, I said, yeah, look at that, it's amazing, is it? He said, Dad, that's fake. That's artificial. That's fake news. And he spotted it, and I didn't, which is a bit stupid of me. But that generation of new journalists coming in and new PR people coming in, they live with it. It's part of just how they are. Like the telephone was part of how we were. So I'm actually really, really optimistic. And there's two other things I'd like to say on this. The young are quite fast now de-digitizing in their lives. So there was a lovely report on BBC South, which is our area, obviously, just a couple of weeks ago, and it was about young people, teenagers and early 20s. They're getting back into knitting. Knitting is huge now, apparently. There are knitting clubs sprouting all over the place. Great for mental health, gets you off your phone, that sort of thing. And the vinyl record is now making a massive comeback. So I think we can get very scared. Say, oh, AI is going to ruin everything. I don't think the young are that stupid, actually. And there was a report in, don't know if anyone saw it, but it's worth a read if you haven't. Report just yesterday in the Financial Times about AI, and the most cynical age group with AI and lack of trust of AI is the 16 to 24-year-old age group. And in the UK, we don't trust it. We don't trust our authorities to regulate AI. The country with the most trust in its government's ability to protect its citizens is weirdly Indonesia. I don't know why, but there you go. So I'm absolutely optimistic that as long as we've got due diligence, as long as we have proper accreditation, as long as journalists get it right. I mean, the BBC messed up, didn't it, with editing Donald Trump's speech, and he wants to sue the living daylights out of it. That seems to have gone a bit quiet. It also made a mistake with the Gaza program, where they got the narrator who was the son of a Hamas leader. So we have a responsibility, Gerald, I think, in our profession to get things right. I think it's really not fair to say, oh, it's all PR. We're two sides of the same coin. But I'm optimistic that the young get it and understand it and will, will temper what AI can do because they will question it.
Interesting. We've just written a blog about is 2026 the year that we all go offline?
Yeah.
It is a trend. It's an interesting one to watch. And crocheting as well, Adam, not just knitting.
No, absolutely. Crocheting as well.
Fazana, I wanted just to come back to you with regard to um, membership of the CIPR. Do you think this is going to drive, a herd of new, members to the CIPR and, the training that we're able to offer our members?
I hope so. I mean, even yesterday, I had a young person reach out just entering the industry wanting to know more about CIPR. And I was always, I'm always interested to know the why, what's a trigger. And she said, well, everything seems to be moving so fast because of AI in the industry that I want to join the CIPR so I can sort of navigate and understand and meet with experienced people. So I thought that was quite interesting because if you think back at how PR has changed so drastically, I mean, even in the 16 years that I've been in the industry, and that pace of change. And I think actually joining an institute like the CIPR and others indeed, I think, it's so fast moving. And I think the lesson for all of us PRs is actually we need to really lean in to understand AI, the impact, the ethical impact, and the fact that we need to not just lean in once and then, relax for a few years, but is that constant leaning in because it's just moving at such a fast pace and just taking that, and what we have a huge abundance of is curiosity. I mean, us PRs are very curious people. We've been working in a dynamic industry. We've already been disrupted by social media platforms that came in a couple of decades ago. And so actually leaning in, being curious, I think is very well, I think is within our sort of skill set. So I do share the optimism that you have, Adam, that we will be able to navigate it. But I think it comes with, dialing up our curiosity and leaning in and being able to respond and move fast. And that's why I think industry bodies like the CIPR are so important because they really help convene conversations like this. Thank you, Vicky and the Midlands Group. And that's why I think it's important to join forces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kate, from an in-house perspective, you and I joined agency. We started our PR career in agency, and we've both spent quite a bit of time in-house.
Yeah.
Do you see opportunity for young or changing? Fazana, mentioned that she changed professions to embrace public relations. Do you see having a view of both sides of agency and in-house?
Yeah.
What's the benefits and risks to both sides with regard to being credible and making sure that your relationships are sound?
I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Actually, somebody was put in touch with me last week who works for a big multinational company and worked in a particular area, but was really interested in moving into PR. So what I'd said to him was, the first thing that I'd said was, I personally think it's easier to make lateral career moves within an organization where you're already established. People already know you, they like you, you've delivered, whatever, you're well networked. You can also pick up those stretch assignments. So if people won't hire you for the actual role, you can get yourself added to a V team that is working on, I know, a big sales kickoff conference or something, or a big launch announcement. So if you are looking to do that, I think there's, most companies are happy to kind of give people time for that, and that also happened to me, because I moved from communications into a business strategy and chief of staff role, and that happened within an organization where I was really well established. So I think my advice would be to try and do it there, and to pick up those stretch assignments. What I'd also said was, and going back to Fazana's point about curiosity, because one of the things that this guy had said to me was, but I don't know journalists, and I really feel this is holding me back. And he felt that was a real stumbling block for him. But then I was saying, well, okay, you don't. So work with people who do. So then you can be introduced to them. But the other thing is, are you curious? Are you a consumer of stories? Are you consuming content? When you consume it, do you deconstruct it? Are you consuming media? Do you understand what a great story is? Are you on social media platforms understanding and looking at this stuff? Because there's a little bit where I think it was Stephen King in his book on writing says, a good writer reads, and a good communications person consumes content. Right? You have to be obsessive about this. If you're not, I don't know kind of why you're in the game, right? It's quite boring. So sorry, that was a very kind of long and labored.
No, not at all.
But so the answer is yes, you can move, but try and move somewhere where you're already well established, because that will be so much easier, and have somebody champion you, or take on a second or third job within the organization. No company will ever turn you down for taking on more work.
This is very true.
Right.
I'd like to invite our attendees to put any questions they may have into the Q&A function, and then we will get round to those. Did anybody else want to come in with a perspective at this juncture? Matt?
I'm just like to say, from a journalist point of view, I think it was right at the beginning we were chatting and saying, "Oh, journalists never pick up the phone." That is true, because we're busy and there's fewer of us, etc., etc. Having said that, Kate's point about do you consume news, what makes an interesting story, is vital, because we have got hours of broadcast and pages of written material, be it online or be it, old-fashioned on Freeview or whatever. We've got acres to fill, and we need stories. So a well-placed story will gain traction. It may not gain traction on the day that Keir Starmer resigns or something. That'll be thrown out the window. But we do need stories, especially at the regional level. So, if you take the Hampshire Chronicle, for example, I mean, I know the editor, so it's okay. But I mean, I can basically write what I like and he'll print it. He trusts me, obviously, and I'm a journalist, so I'm not saying you get away with that. But interesting stories. And here's the thing: this is where I go anti-PR and have my journalist hat on. And Gerald, I think you might agree with me, is it's got to be interesting as a story for the end user, i.e. my reader, my listener, my viewer. It doesn't have to be interesting just because the company wants a bit of publicity. And I find this is worse, I think, in agencies than in in-house. In-house, you're on a salary and, you want to get your stories across, and that's fine. Agency, I may be wrong here, but agencies, you're on retainers, you've got your clients are saying, we haven't had anything in the papers for 3 months, and you start to push stuff that, quite frankly, isn't great for us. And so this isn't a lesson in PR, this is a lesson in AI and trust. But you will gain our trust if you're feeding us stuff that may not on that particular day be interesting, but we get why you sent it to us. Versus, oh God, here's another one. I mean, I remember when I was presenting at Radio Solent many, many years ago, Brittany Ferries was the worst. It was all in hand-delivered letters in those days, not emails. But, I would get so many blinking press releases about, we've got a new restaurant on our ship, or, you can take the kids for free. This is not interesting for the Radio Solent listener. It happens to be based in Portsmouth, but it was rubbish. So, and then they send a good one, and I don't even bother reading it because I'm fed up with them. So, if you're looking at trust, PR has a role to play, journalists have a role to play, and it's about trusting each other. You only get that if you stop trying to peddle stuff that you think is exciting because your client will be pleased, rather than actually it's exciting for our audience.
Well, yeah, I totally agree, and perhaps this is where, from a time poor perspective or a need to hit my KPIs perspective, the sensational aspect of storytelling comes in. Getting a journalist to, they are for various reasons don't like being approached by the phone anymore. Not that's not a carte blanche, obviously, but it is difficult to get hold of a journalist on the telephone. So how do you get them to open an email without putting a sensational headline in it? It's a
Yeah, yeah,
difficult one, isn't it? It really
yeah.
is.
But we need you as much as you need us. That's the point.
The great thing is that we're all talking today about this issue. I don't think I've ever been on a panel with this many journalists, in-house people, you name it, which has been really, really eye-opening and fantastic. So we're already approaching this in the correct way, which is, how do we strengthen our relationships with each other? How do we manage this properly? And if we do manage it properly, we could probably see this as a really good opportunity for us to strengthen our relationships. It's probably a once in a decade that the PR industry and media come together, where they have a vested interest, where they have an interest where they want to get this right. So us coming together for this panel today, for me, is a great step forward in terms of making sure we get to grips with this.
Yeah.
Matt, I couldn't agree with you more. But here, I think actually our legislators, and I'm a liberal-minded person, being a BBC journalist, obviously, but I think social media and AI has got to the point now that actually both the PR industry and us as journalists, we need protection, I think. So both sides, and that protection has to come from legislation. Now, Kate will probably disagree with me here. To be fair to Microsoft, I think it
Will
is
I?
actually very responsible. But quite frankly, I think it is, and Keir Starmer was talking about this just yesterday when he had them all in Downing Street, the Metas of this world. I think we are getting to the stage, especially with AI creeping into social media so powerfully, that the Metas of this world and to a lesser extent Google, but certainly Facebook, Instagram, etc., they are becoming dangerous, especially for our young people. We've all seen the news reports about suicides and blah blah blah, and I don't think they are self-regulating at all. And personally, and I think if we were still in the EU, this would be a better way of doing it, but we're not, so we have to do it ourselves. I think there has to be legislation. I'm not a great fan of legislation. I'm a liberal, as I say, but I think social media now is obviating its responsibility to society, and it needs to be hauled in. But Kate, you'll probably disagree.
Thank you with your journalist question there, Adam. No, I will not. Well, so for starters, so thank you for putting me on the spot. No, for starters, so I actually left Microsoft, so I'm not representing Microsoft. This is merely me riffing with my vast knowledge of having worked there. So the thing I would observe is we believe that the King's Speech in May next year will probably announce an AI Act. Obviously, you've got the recent Data Act that came through in sort of 2025, which starts to actually make deep fakes illegal. And so it is looking at that and the stuff that came out with Grok. My observation would be one, and it's a phrase that colleagues who used to work in Brussels used, is that you talked about the speed at which technology is evolving. And there was a phrase that was used called liquid policymaking, which almost is like, if you can imagine sort of mercury, it's like you have to go as fast as the technology, but that isn't typically how laws are made, how our structures, which were basically founded in the 19th century, or certainly it's sort of mid 20th century kind of work. So you could say that the policy infrastructure kind of doesn't map to that. So therefore it is about how we can act say as individuals and also as organizations and as consumers. We can make choices about consumers, about who we buy from and what platforms we use and what we decide to do. I mean, I'm with you, Adam, in terms of I think it's democratic for states to be absolutely involved in representing the people and sort of putting frameworks in place. But it's the speed at which this happens. So I think you've always got to look at putting pressure on companies to be responsible, consuming from responsible companies, and making sure that we ourselves are being responsible when we're doing things. And that's a tall order when we have a business model that frequently monetizes outrage. I think that's
Yeah.
hard.
That's true. Yeah.
It's really
Very
hard.
true.
Just following on from that point, Matt, do you question to you as an agency owner, and this is when I as an agency owner, I'm challenged with myself. Do your clients know what a good story is? Do they try and get you to, create, massive press releases around a widget enhancement and expect, unreasonable amounts of coverage off the back of it?
Most of them do. We work in partnership with our clients, and a big part of our role is consultancy, so to offer advice and guidance to them. There may be you may get lots of coverage for a new widget in sector press because it's really, really interesting to the right press, to the right readers. So yeah, I mean, for us, it's all about guidance, working with your clients, and then helping them make the right decisions, which is why they employ us in the first place as well. One thing I was just going to say was that obviously with AI visibility at the moment in GEO, it's made coverage in the media that much more valuable.
Yeah.
Which means, I think Farzana talked about it earlier, where there's lots and lots of other organizations, people from outside our profession trying to get into doing PR, trying to get coverage in media, because the value of media coverage is going up, credible media coverage. And that's because you're going to get better AI visibility on the in terms of GEO. So there are a lot of organizations out there, SEO companies and that are looking in on the PR industry and are looking at the media industry as well, saying they want a piece of that because they know how valuable the coverage is. So that is only going to compound things over the next couple of years as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree with Matt. I think it's such a great time to be within sort of PR communications industry. If you look at how LLMs are actually using that information. I would also say, let's also anticipate, and I was talking to somebody the other day about this, agentic AI. So if and when in a world where we all have our own little agent that we send out and say, I trained you to understand what I like, and therefore you will pull the news stories that are interesting to you. So think of it as a kind of not necessarily the algorithm or the curated feed, but this is hyper curated. But it also means it will interact with brands for you. It might come and find out what the best insurance is for you. It might go back for. So we've also got this coming in terms of potentially that hyper personalization, which also, again, I think if PR and comms can get ahead of and think about this, what does this actually mean? Then it puts us in a really strong position as well to have an opinion on it now and to start again taking that strategic role, as opposed to waiting for people to come back and say, here is a brief, here is a problem that you need to solve.
I don't think that I agree, but I think the young, I think they quite like happening on things. So, a lot of young people listen to Radio 2, and they listen to Radio 2 because they like the music, but they never quite know what interesting speech is going to come up. If everything is hyper curated for everybody, you're going to miss out on an awful lot of stuff you might have just happened across. So I think I agree. And of course, the evil social media giants would love it to be hyper curated because they generate advertising revenue and blah, blah, blah. But actually, the human being is a curious thing, and they like to see things that they may not have thought they'd like to see. And I don't think we need to take that away, which is why, for example, I would say, wouldn't I, the BBC is brilliant because it gives everything. It gives a flavour of everything, and you can pick and choose. And actually, if you look at the young who don't imbibe linear television or radio anymore, they're all on podcasts and YouTube and whatnot. They flip around and they'll suddenly, one of my children will say, there's an amazing thing on dinosaurs I read, or the Hannah Fry thing is brilliant, where she's done a series on how weird things work. And
Yeah.
People love that. And if you're hyper optimized, you're never going to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
Gerald, you had your. I'm
I,
just going to come to Gerald, and then I'm going to come to each of you. We've got 4 minutes left, so
I,
that hour's gone quickly. Kind of come to you, Gerald, and then if you could just have some final thoughts, everybody. I'll come to you, and then I'll wrap up
I was
session.
really just going to support what Adam was covering there. The Edelman Trust bring out regular
Mm.
research on, I think it's 18 to 20-year-olds, trends and so on. Uh, and they are less and less enamored with using the online technology to read and find out things. And some of them are going to newspapers and other methods of information. So they are constantly experimenting, and I think that reflects the fact that the technology is moving as quickly as it is, and I think it's healthy.
Mm.
You mentioned the kite mark,
Yeah,
Gerald.
yeah.
So, in summing up, the conversation that we've had today from the Chartered Institute of Journalism's perspective, is this a way that you think you can move forward to give accreditation to your members and to start building that bridge of trust between journalists and public
Yes,
relations?
yes, absolutely. We have to embrace that, include that in our code of conduct because it's not there. But we certainly, because we also issue press cards and so on, we have a very rigorous process that we go through, and we believe that the option we have members who just don't want to use AI. They tell us they don't want to use AI, and we say, well, just put on the end of what you're doing, I haven't used AI. It's as simple as that. But I think in communicating with one another, whether it's in PR or in the media, to actually just flag up where this has started from and on the basis of why you've got it, so that we're building in an element of trust
Hmm.
which doesn't placate the fact that you still have to do your job professionally and truthfully. But
Indeed.
it immediately breaks down the first barrier in that you know where it's coming from. It's coming from a professional who is doing their job and keeping you as a journalist in the loop and informed.
Thank you, Gerald. Adam, as a practicing journalist, would you be happy to have this kite mark? I mean, you're so well
Absolutely.
established anyway. We all know and trust you anyway. But
No, it's very sweet of you. No, look, anything that is an accreditation that shows provenance, that shows that actually you are getting what you're being told you're getting, has got to be a good thing. That's why organisations like the CIPR are so vital, because for us as journalists, we need to know that we can trust. In terms of AI and trust, as I said at the beginning, I'm quite optimistic. I think the young are cleverer than you think. And I would say it's better to be right than first, but that's very difficult in a competitive world. And I would say that AI is useful. It speeds things up, it speeds research up, but the human being must be the final arbiter. It's always a human at the end of it that makes the final decision whether to run a story or whether to send out a press release or whatever. AI can never do that or should never do that. So my view would be better to be right than first, and remember we're all humans.
thank you, Matt. Coming to you for some final thoughts.
Um, I see this as an opportunity. If we manage it correctly, I can see that we can further strengthen our relationships between PRs and the media. It's probably a once in a decade opportunity where this is cropped up, and I think we manage it correctly. We all work together, and we will win out of it as well. AI is a tool used correctly. It can be very, very powerful. We just have to make sure that we're using it correctly as both industries, and then the consumers win, which is the most important thing. And we've built up trust and kept it.
Thanks, Matt. Kate.
I think there's a huge opportunity for communications professionals, say, given, as we talked about, given where we are with LLM. So that should give us real confidence. What I would also really encourage everybody here, and you might be doing it already, is experiment, play. understand what AI can do for you. Build stuff yourself. Just have a bit of a mess around. It's like, so because I think the more you do it, the more it does become your tool, and it isn't something that you're told to work with. And I would say ethics, 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 which is really hard to say 3 times. I don't know why I did that. But anyway, that needs to be at the heart of everything we do.
Thank you, Kate. Fazana, final thoughts to you.
I would say this, well, a huge thank you to the CIPR Midlands group. I think this has been such an interesting and informative conversation. And I think one positive, solid, concrete outcomes come out is hopefully the Chartered Institute of Public Relations and the Chartered Institute of Journalism working together in order to ensure that actually the CIPR members that do that extra bit, join the CIPR, do their CPD, their ethical component, they stay ahead of the game. I think it's only right that they are recognised by journalists as having that extra bit of credibility. And I think that would be a wonderful outcome if we can work together in that basis.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fazana. We're CIPR Wessex, but we love the Midlands as well, so that's fine.
Sorry.
That's all right. Oh, thank you all so much for taking part in today's event. What's really come through today is that it isn't about one part of the industry. It's a shared challenge, shaped by real pressures, and one that requires not just strong standards, but shared commitment to apply them consistently in practice. We'll be submitting a blog to the CIPR magazine Influence, uploading the video of today's event to the CIPR YouTube, and sharing some shorts on our social media channels. So please like and share so that we can reach as many colleagues as we can with this important discussion as possible. You'll be invited to answer a couple of questions about today's event. Please take a couple of minutes to let us know what you thought, and to tell us about any future topics that you'd like us to cover. But with that said, thank you very much to my panellists. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to come and join us and speak about this really important topic. Hope it's the first of many times we'll see you on our panels.